All right, what's up, everybody? Thanks for clicking this video. Thanks for tuning into my channel. My name's Simon Hill, Black American from Louisiana, coming to you live from Budapest, Hungary. Today is May 3rd, 2024, and I'm here with my beautiful wife, AKDI. Say hi, boo.
Hi everyone, I'm AKDI and I'm from Turkey.
All right. And today we are reviewing the 2017 film, The Young Karl Marx, directed by Haitian director Raoul Peck. He also directed a documentary about James Baldwin called I Am Not Your Negro. He's also done a lot of documentaries about other historical events throughout the world. He's a great director. I really liked I Am Not Your Negro, and I've been meaning to watch this film for a long time. But we watched it about 2 days ago, and it's still fresh in my mind. Is it fresh in yours?
Yeah, somewhat fresh, and I've been reading reviews like this morning to
Hmm.
refresh my memory as well.
Yeah. And I it's a film I've been meaning to watch, but I'll be honest with everybody. I tried to watch this film at least on two different occasions, and I fell asleep each time because it's a kind of a slow moving movie. It's a kind of educational historical drama, so there's not a lot of music in it either, and really not that much action. Just a lot of old white men in suits debating about philosophy and politics. So it might be a snooze fest for some people. I don't know. How did you feel?
I think there's a certain audience for biopics, and also like there are certain times when you want to like watch biopics when you're feeling like I don't know intellectual or want to learn something. Not like every film goes with every mood,
Hmm.
and yeah, like I just remember every time I remember us watching Oppenheimer at like 11 a.m. in
Hmm.
Istanbul, and
Hmm.
we probably wouldn't have maybe liked it that much if we watched it like at 1 a.m.,
Yeah,
at
exactly.
night.
Yeah, I give that advice to everybody. One of my students recently said, I tried to watch Oppenheimer and it was about 7 p.m. And I said, what are you doing to yourself? There ain't no way you're going to stay awake.
Yeah, but I do think like it was kind of hard to. I think it's kind of hard to like make a movie about Karl Marx because he deals with kind of like topics that might be seen as boring, like economics, politics, and all of those things. Even though he had this somewhat adventurous life, I guess,
Hmm.
moving from country to country and stuff like that. But I think like the director did a good job of keeping the story alive.
Hmm.
When I watched it, at least I felt like that.
Yeah, making it real, making it feel alive. And Marx did live sort of an exciting life, but it was exciting for the times he lived in and the things that he did and things that happened to him. Uh, but I think, overall, it's only exciting if you're like really into that part of history or who Marx was.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. I would say like yeah,
It's
agree.
different than the Bob Marley biopic because we watched Bob Marley's, and that it's different because he's a rock star. Most people have heard his songs, and Marley is generally more sexy than Marx.
Yeah, and like yeah, everybody knows one Bob Marley song, right?
Hmm.
And generally he is probably like his philosophy or part of his philosophy I would say is like, everybody would agree to some degree.
Hmm.
Like peace and stuff like that, even if not like his religion. But Karl Marx is like still a somewhat controversial figure.
Right, and it's interesting because Marx, I think, hands down, is way more influential as a person than Bob Marley. But because of the gap in time, he lived over 150 years ago, and also the propaganda that people are given about him, good or bad. A lot of people have varying opinions about him, but he is definitely somebody who's changed the entire world. If this one guy didn't exist, how different would our world be?
Definitely, definitely. Like as I was watching the movie, I was thinking like, there are parties all over the world called communist parties for every government, like you know, that is influenced by this guy. Like
Hmm.
in Turkey, we have the Communist Party. In America, you have the Communist Party. Every single country probably has a Communist Party.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
it's such a uniting force, I feel like, in that way. And that's what I was thinking as I was watching it.
Right,
And
right.
also, I think it was an interesting choice to show like his youth
Yeah,
because yeah, that was like I think that what kept the story alive a little bit.
right. I think Yeah, I think because this is the young Karl Marx, and they put that explicitly in the name of this movie because they want to try to change the image that people have of Marx. Most people just see the picture of the old fat man who looks like Santa Claus, but the Santa Claus who wants to give everybody your gifts. So they wanted to try to. I think we texted about this before, but the point of the movie is to make Karl Marx fuckable. So after watching this acting, is Karl Marx sexy? Because I think that's what the goal is too. Because they show a lot of Marx getting pussy, having drinking until he falls under the table, living a sort of like you know rough bachelor lifestyle kind of. I don't know.
I mean, first of all, I wouldn't fuck Karl Marx if that's what you're saying.
Hmm.
But yeah, like in the movie, he definitely feels more fuckable. But at the same time, like I feel like during those times, philosophers and certain politicians were like the rock stars of that generation, you know?
Hmm.
So, like, yeah, of course, a aristocrat lady will escape and be with Marx.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, yeah.
Because it's like running away with Marley.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. I know you wouldn't fuck Marx because you're more of an Ingalls girl.
Wow. No, no, I'm not. But it's just that I cannot. The reason why I wouldn't fuck him is because I cannot get the image of the old Marx out of my head. So it's like impossible for me to, do it with the young him as
I
well.
got you. I got you. Okay. I would definitely smoke with Marx though, or drink with him, or
Yeah.
play chess with him.
Yeah, I'd love to like be friends with him and have conversations and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. All right. So, by the way, my guy, the Violator, just jumped into the comments. He sent a link to Kendrick Lamar's new diss. I don't know if Kendrick really dropped a new diss or if this is just a meme because it looks like the back of a woman's head and she's about to twerk. I don't know. So, Violator, leave a comment and let me know if that's true. But yeah, back to this film. Hold up, wait. He sent another comment. Let me see what it says. Marx was super racist. Okay, that's an interesting point too. I mean, let's talk about this. So this film was directed by a black man about like old European society, right? And there's maybe like one or two black characters sprinkled throughout this film. But I think the interesting part is that this black man was able to direct this film and make it feel alive and real and sort of humanize these people who probably would have looked down on the real Raoul Peck if if he traveled to that time. I don't know. I was thinking about that while watching the film. But what did you think about that?
I really don't know like what Marx's like association with race, but
Mhm.
like I would assume any philosopher or like big thinker in that time might feel like probably like the Enlightenment will come from Europe
Mhm.
and the white race. So
Mhm.
I wouldn't like. I'm not surprised if he was racist or if he thought like black people couldn't philosophize or something like that,
Yeah.
because I would, yeah, like that's what people in that time thought, I feel like.
Right, right. And yeah, there are quotes from Marx where he calls black people like monkeys or gorillas. Marx also even made disparaging comments about Jews, even though he was a descendant of a Jewish person himself. And that's the crazy thing about just being black in this world. Like there are if the further back in time we go, we find people that we admire, but then they held some very extreme views that we sort of have to reconcile, right? Like I like the idea of America's democracy and equality for all men, but literally those same people were owning slaves. So how do I reconcile those two ideas? And the same thing applies to Marx as well. But also the same thing, Violator, that applies to Taxi Driver, right? We look at this film and we appreciate it for being a beautiful film, but it also has a lot of anti-black undertones within it. So how do we reconcile those two things? It's one of the big questions of just viewing media or being black in this world. Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course. And I think like a good way to do that would be, I'm sure like there are still black people in the history who had like communist ideas, let's say like Marx,
Hmm.
but they joined the movement later on and things like that, or they, uh,
Hmm.
cr- created another similar movement, but for like black people or for racial equality. So Like
Hmm.
bringing those people up to our generation now and talking about them might help with the
Hmm.
situation, because yeah, they were excluded from those times, yeah, because
Yeah.
of the situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And plus, nobody's going to be perfect. And hell, the ideas that we might hold now, 100 years from now, people might say those ideas are problematic. And so we never know how society will move. But we should never also excuse anti-blackness or sexism, right? Because I
Yeah.
think even Marx has some sexist ideas, which wouldn't be uncommon for a man of his time. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. But going back to the film, let's just run through the story generally. So the film opens up by telling us that the time and place is like the 1800s. There's revolutions popping up in Europe, and they show these people walking in a forest, and they all look like peasants, and they're picking up dead tree branches. And while they're picking up the dead tree branches, there's a quote that says, uh, you know. Uh, Picking a branch off of a tree and picking dead branches off of the ground, both are considered theft. And there's two types of corruption. There's the corruption that comes from naturally in people, and then there's the corruption that society creates by making laws that criminalize certain behavior. And as this quote is playing, these men on horseback, who are the police, come and beat up the people who are now running for their lives after all they were doing was just picking up dead branches off of somebody's land that they owned. And some of them are killed, some of them are really injured and stuff like that. Men, women, and children. What did you think about that opening scene?
I liked the opening scene because it didn't start right away with like showing us Marx and all those political conversations, but rather
Hmm.
it showed us like the people
Hmm.
who were actually going through the struggle. And yeah, and once again, I was thinking, like, damn, like French people and British people are so brutal
Hmm.
to everyone,
Hmm.
like, and during that time.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's what I was thinking. Like, I felt sad.
Yeah, yeah. I like that opening scene too, because once again, it brings sort of home the idea that Marx was basically about. Like, our society is divided by people who have and have not. And the people who try to get anything for themselves, there's a lot of criminalization against them, right? So picking up dead branches from the ground, it is still considered theft. Think about that. Like, if I were to walk into somebody's yard, in somebody's house, and just pick up the fruits that fall from their tree, people would arrest me. They would still throw me in jail. Now, am I wrong? Did I really commit a crime, or did society commit a crime against me and all of us by making it criminal just to pick up an orange that falls from a tree that happens to be on somebody's land? So I like that. I really like that part.
Yeah, yeah, the philosophy was definitely nice, like to
Hmm.
start with that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I see Avery is here. I see Mad. I see Violators here. I'm definitely gonna look at that Kendrick disc later. Definitely gonna check it out if it actually is real. I hope it's not AI. But yeah, we're here to talk about the film for right now. But then moving forward in the story, basically Marx is living, I believe, in Paris at the time, and he's in a group of other philosophers, and they're debating about the publishing he's writing and stuff like that. And Marx is sort of like, you guys just want to sit here and philosophize more and give vague ideas about what socialism can be. Meanwhile, the police are literally about to break into the headquarters of where all these radicals are and arrest them. And Marx is like, I'm sick of this. I don't want to deal with you guys anymore. And he opens the door and lets the police arrest all of them. And while they're sitting in the paddy wagon, the police car, whatever, one of the guys is like, Marx, I want you to start writing more and be a part of this new organization that we're forming and stuff like that. And the story then goes to England. And in England, there's this guy who owns this big factory. And basically, a bunch of the workers there are on strike, and they're complaining about the working conditions. One of the girls who works there lost her fingers. And there's this one girl there whose name is Mary. Mary confronts the boss, and she's like, my name's Mary Burns. I'm from Ireland. You look at all of us Irish as less than human, but I'm here to tell you that the wages you pay are not humane. And she's like standing up to the boss, and the boss is like, get her out of here, and she gets fired and none of the other workers stand up with her, and she leaves. But the boss's son, who is Ingalls, right? He follows Mary into like the slums of the underworld of England. What did you think about those two opening scenes that introduce, our two main characters?
Yeah, the first like scene where Marx is like in that, I guess that's a publishing room, and they're in Cologne, by the way.
Oh, that was in Germany.
Um,
Sorry.
yeah, but yeah, that was interesting. And as I read, like, that society that he was first working for as a journalist, it was the Hegelians and
Hmm.
Hegelians. I don't know how to say it, but
Hegelians, yeah, Hegelians.
Hegelians.
Hmm.
Yeah, but they were basically like, yeah, they were like, they wanted the same things with Karl Marx, but they were like more on the idea of it and not the
Hmm.
execution of it. So
Hmm.
he was having some problems with them. But it definitely showed like that courage that a young person would have, because when you're young, like you're ready to do everything for your ideals, for your
Hmm.
political views. You want to go and protest and all of those things. And he was like that, and he didn't care. And I like the fact that as the movie goes on, we show like it shows that some of his ambitions are dying as he gets older,
Well,
which is
Marx's ambitions.
like not his ideals, they're not dying, but like the way he's now, like at the very ending scenes at least,
Hmm.
he's a bit passive about like what he has to do, because we can see how the society and the system kind of breaks him down a little bit, because at the end he's a bit worried about like his kids and stuff like that.
Yeah, I just kind of disagree with that. My thing is, after watching this film, I feel like Marx was a bit lazy. He was a lazy dude. Like he always was late behind his work. He always had to owe somebody some work that he didn't do. He took days off from writing. Like he was kind of lazy, and I
I
feel like
I don't know if he was lazy. Like he was reading a whole like encyclopedias and stuff like that, and
Mhm.
learning languages in a day or something. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, like I don't think he was lazy, but that's just a lot of hard work to read something or study something and then like philosophize about it, think about it, come up with new things, come up with critiques, and then like write about that. That's a
Mhm.
long work.
It is a lot of work, yeah, and I sympathize with that a lot. But your job is to write, man, so you should be trying to do something every day. Try to, knock out a little bit every day. But yeah, Marx was basically, from my impression when we first saw him, they're painting him as this very young, fiery radical, and yeah, he's 26 at the time. So it's cool to see this film that this guy who we always imagined as this old white man Santa Claus type figure in the picture, he once was this young, ambitious, very hungry young man, right? No different than like how we watch these films about a young man who wants to make his mark in the world, like in Book of Clarence, right? Clarence decides, you know what, I'm going to go out on my own and start my own Messiah business or whatever, and he becomes successful. And Marx is sort of like that same thing, that hunger, that drive of a young man who wants to make his mark in the world. And I also liked how Ingalls, in his section, he already has all the wealth because of his birth. His father owns the company, but he sympathizes with the poor people. So he goes down into the trenches where the Irish are, and they're drinking and singing songs, and he's willing to like stand up and say, "I want to write a book about your stories." And even though he gets punched in the face for it, he still's like, "These are my ideas," and that was cool to see.
Yeah, definitely. I was gonna get to Mary, and I really like her character because he is like somewhat of a feminist icon in this movie, at least. And
Mhm.
I looked it up if he was ever like that
The
much
she,
involved.
you mean
If
she?
if she was ever like that much involved in politics, and it looks like she was always somewhat supporting role for Engels
Hmm.
like throughout her life. So that's a bit sad to see, but I'm understanding like the conditions of that time.
Hmm.
And probably like no one would want to hear a woman like give preachings about, politics and economics and stuff.
Yeah.
But it was nice to see like in these factories and things like that, it's not only men who are, being treated unfairly, it's a lot of women,
Hmm.
especially because of like wars and colonialism and everything. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. A lot of the women were working in factories because it used to be seen as women's work to work in a textile factory or any sort of that sort of thing. And men were supposed to be outside in the farms and stuff like that. But yeah, also a lot of men were going to war and also going abroad to different parts of the world to colonize and stuff like that too. And yeah, the film also really brings home the dangers of working in factories at the time because they mentioned throughout there's child labor. Like there's kids as young as like 5 or 6 years old working in factories, and also a lot of women too in there who are like losing fingers or losing their eyes or losing their lives, working for capitalism. And it was very real, throughout the
Yeah.
film.
Like, yeah, at one point, I think they mentioned like kids working in night shifts. I was
Yeah.
like, what the hell is that? Like, that's crazy.
Yeah, yeah. And once again, the film really does make a good, paint picture illustration of the environment that Marx was in. Like, we might think it's radical now to say, abolish capitalism, abolish factory owners, abolish the system where there are bosses and workers. Now, because it's a lot easier for us now. We have 8-hour work days. We only work 5 days a week. We get vacation. We get dental. We get healthcare. But at the beginning of this thing, there was none of that. You literally started working at 7 years old, and if you kept all of your fingers and your eyes, maybe you could live till 30. So it's a very different world.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, he was like very radical to have these ideas because, yeah, it was like the age of production, like,
Hmm.
after the steam machines and stuff like that. So it was like, I don't know, like somewhat like very like I feel like people who could afford to produce something or have
Hmm.
factories and things like that, it was like the golden age for them
Hmm. Hmm.
because they
Yeah.
could somewhat transition into mass production.
Yeah. Yeah. But moving forward in the story, basically after Ingalls gets knocked out in the Irish pub, and we go back to Marx in Prague, and we see him interacting with Jenny, right? And he's talking to Jenny about all the money that the guy who publishes his work owes him, and his plans to start a new magazine and new pamphlets and stuff like that. We then see Jenny and Marx have sex. Which once again, this film I think is really trying to humanize Marx or just play up his masculinity because the scene didn't need to be there, but it's there just to show the humanity of this guy. Did you have any comments about that scene?
I mean, maybe they were also trying to show like Marx had a good relationship with his wife
Mm-hmm.
as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like it looked like they had a loving, like real love relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And I definitely have to say, like Jenny is like an angel
Mm-hmm.
because she like finds a way to, um, I don't know, just accept Marx in everything that he does, good and bad.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah,
I want to say all the women in this story, well, at least the two main characters, Jenny, Karl Marx's wife, and Mary Burns, Engels' girlfriend or whatever, they steal the show. Like they have the best acting, they have the best scenes, the best lines, in my opinion. Right, aside from the guy who played Karl Marx, by the way, they really, carried the movie in a certain sense.
yeah, I would agree.
Yeah. But moving on, Mark's he's getting paid by this guy who's also a very rich man, but he also has socialist leanings and tendencies. And so he tells Jenny, I'm going to start working for him more. And he also then goes to a big conference or a big a fair in the park where this philosopher named Proudhon is speaking. And Proudhon is a very famous philosopher who was a contemporary of Marx, who was more anarchist. Basically, he believed that all property is theft, and that's one of his famous quotes. And I like how in this movie, they dramatize the beef, not the beef, but the differences in opinion that Proudhon had with Marx. So Proudhon said, all property is theft, but Marx said, well, what is it if I steal property? Did I steal theft? And he's basically showing that the film is showing that Marx disagreed with this idealization of this world, right? He wanted to make it more concrete. And the philosophers have talked too much that they've actually talked themselves into a circle. So they're saying crazy things like property is theft. But if I steal a house, I didn't steal theft. I stole a house. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it was like nice to see like that times environment
Hmm.
and it comes to like politics and things like that. And yeah, I think like they had somewhat like of a friendly competition
Hmm.
or like friendly debating like environment
Hmm.
with Marx.
Yeah, yeah. But this is probably most of the film. And once again, for anybody who has not seen this film, the film is a lot of this. You'll have a lot of cameos and appearances from big dogs in the philosophy world. So you have like Bakunin show up, you have Proudhon show up, you have Whiteling show up, and if you don't know who any of these old dead white guys are, you won't care. But if you if you're into this world, you're gonna be like, oh shit. It's like watching a movie about like Pac or like Jay Z, and then Nas gets a cameo and Biggie gets a cameo. You be like, oh god, okay, okay. But yeah, it's interesting how Marx meets all of these different people who have different ideas about a socialist future. Some of them are anarchists, some of them are socialists, and some of them are far, far, far communist. But Marx sort of like juxtaposes his ideas to their ideas about what the future looks like. So yeah.
Yeah, that was interesting because I didn't know like any of the guys. Honestly, I just knew like Marx, and it was hard for me to grasp like, okay, how big is this guy of like how much influence does this guy have? I didn't know, but
Hmm.
I did learn like like throughout the movie because
Hmm.
yeah, then like you see some of these people in conferences in like big places
Hmm.
when it comes to like politics and philosophy. So you
Yeah.
can like even if you don't know them, you will understand who's important and who's not.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Because Proudhon was like the most famous philosopher of the time, and his ideas were very popular. But Marx is sort of on the come up, and he's trying to, you know, challenge Proudhon's idea and challenge the general thinking at the time that philosophers just only philosophize, but there has to be some real material changes to the world if we're going to think about these big ideas. So, moving on in the story, Marx meets his publisher Rouge at the office, or Rouge, I forgot exactly how to pronounce it. And Rouge is there before Marx shows up. Rouge is talking to Engels because Engels is there talking about, I want to publish some work too. And Rouge is complaining that Marx hasn't written anything and that, Marx owes him more articles. Then Marx shows up and says, Rouge, you need to give me money, which is crazy. Yeah, Marx comes here and tries to bully the older white man for money that he thinks he's owed. Engels is sitting there, and Marx and Engels sort of have like a conversation, and they realize that they admire each other's work. At first, there was like, sort of disdain because Marx knew that Engels was the son of a rich man, but eventually they realized that they both have very similar interests. Marx is a fan of Engels' writings about the working class in England, and Engels is definitely a fan of Marx's writing and pamphlets and stuff like that. What did you think about when the two characters met?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I didn't know like the characters historically.
Hmm.
So when I met Engels' character, I was like, okay, like he's nice. Like when they had that, when they started becoming friends and stuff like that. But I was always like doubting if Engels was gonna do something shady.
Mm.
But he didn't, and I was like, okay, like this guy is like real about his ideas, and him trying to help the proletariat.
The proletariat.
Yeah, so and like he was loyal and he was like I really liked his character in the
Hmm.
movie and I guess also in history.
Yeah, definitely. The way the characters act with each other, you feel like there's a genuine friendship or kinship between them because it starts off with a bit animosity, and then in the next scene, they're like having drinks together, playing chess all day, revealing their innermost thoughts and beliefs and stuff like that. So they have like a real bromance at the very beginning. And the first,
Brocialism.
yeah, brocialism. And I think you said like you thought they were gonna fuck. You thought they was.
Yeah. I was like, okay, this is a drunken night and they come home and they're like close face to face close and they're arguing about like politics and stuff like that. I thought there was going to be a passionate kiss.
No, 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 no bussy action in this movie. There's no bussy.
Yeah.
There's no, none of that. None of that. But yeah, basically they meet, and before Ruge can come back to pay Marx for the money that Marx bullied him to give. They're outside walking in the street, and the police are there in the street checking people's documents and passports. Because at this time in Germany, they were very critical of radicals and they didn't want any socialists or anarchists in the country. So Marx and Engels start running from the police, and there's like a a semi-funny type Monty Python chase scene where Marx is running through like people's houses and jumping over chicken coops and stuff like that, and Ingalls is running through back alleys, and eventually they like evade the police with a little bit of help from the working class too. Later on that night, they're like getting really drunk, talking about the future, talking about writing together, and they decide that they're going to start collaborating. And Marx reveals that he literally has no money. He is very broke. But because Ingalls is rich, he's going to help him, get back on his feet. They go back home, and the Jenny wakes up the next morning and finds Ingalls, the strange man, in his house, drunken on the floor, and Marx drunk at the table. They have breakfast the next morning. Marx tells Jenny, we're going to start writing together. But Jenny then later tells Ingalls, please be careful around my husband. Help him stay on the right track. You're a healthy guy, Ingalls. You drink and you can run the next day, but Marx needs like 3 or 4 days to recover after drinking. So please try to help my husband. What did you think about all of that part?
Yeah. So I was reading one of the reviews, and apparently, this like police chase scene, there's nothing recorded of something like that within
Mm-hmm.
Marx's life.
Mm-hmm.
So people are saying that this part of the movie was added by the director, Raoul
Mm-hmm.
Peck.
Mm-hmm.
And they are saying that, okay, this is a bit of like a hint to like the American society and police discrimination a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know like if that's true, but even if that's true, I think that's kind of dope
Mm-hmm.
to have like that sort of a hint, because yeah, like if you're poor or working class, or any other minorities, like the police will target you sort of
Mm-hmm.
anywhere around the world, like not only in America.
Right, right.
So that was a good part, I felt like, and it also added a bit of humor.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to like Engels and Jenny, I thought, okay, like is he flirting? Because it's kind of like, it's not that uncommon where like two, guys link up and then one of them tries to have sex with the other one's wife
Yo,
or
that's
things
wild.
like that, and there's like an affair and stuff, but like happily it wasn't like that. And I really like that, whole like sort of little circle that they created with Marx and Engels and their wives. Like
Mm-hmm.
they are all able to talk about politics, about like human rights, about workers' rights and things like that. And
Mm-hmm.
both of them are like okay with including their wives, especially
Mm-hmm.
considering that time.
Yeah, yeah.
So I really like that connection that they all had.
Yeah. As far as the chase scene, I was thinking that while watching, I was like, that probably never happened. But it's a bit of dramatization and action to break up the monotony of this film. Because once again, this film is mostly old white guys in suits talking and debating about philosophy and challenging each other's books. But that scene was probably there, yeah, to highlight the fact that at this time, the socialists, anarchists, communists, they were seen as the most disliked people in society, and the police probably were after them, beating them up, killing them, throwing them in jail, whatever. So I like that scene, even though it probably didn't happen. And you sort of have to accept part of that fakeness in a movie, especially when you're telling people's lives. As far as like Jenny confronting Ingalls, like help my husband, I was like, I don't know if I want my wife doing that with my homies. Do I want my wife saying like, watch out for Simon, he can't handle his drink? I'd be like, who are you talking to, woman? I know how to handle my brain, handle my beer. But it was cool. It was cool that they created that sort of social safety net with each other, because there was like a kinship. They were all sort of dedicated to the struggle. And I also like how there was this one scene where Marx woke up from his sleep and he had a dream or a nightmare about one of those people at the beginning of the film who were picking dead branches off of the ground. They got killed by the police, and that woke Marx up. And it sort of brought it home that Marx was always sort of thinking about the working class, the proletariat, and how unfair our society is to those people.
Yeah, I like that scene too with the dream. And
Mm-hmm.
I didn't understand if it was like if he was actually there and he was like having nightmares about a memory, or
Hmm.
he was thinking about it. But either way, it was cool.
Yeah, yeah. So moving on in the story, basically, Marx meets up with Prudhomme, Bakunin, and Ingalls, and also Jenny is there at basically this. I don't know how to say this salon where nude paintings are being drawn, but also Prudhomme is getting his sketch done as well, and the guys are like drinking, smoking a lot, and
It's
having
like a social hub or something, like a
yeah, but it's like a
philosophy arts hub
a philosophy
for,
art cafe
yeah.
where nude paintings are getting drawn. But yeah, basically, Ingalls and Marx meet up with Bakunin and Prudhomme, and they tell them that they're going to be writing a book critiquing Prudhomme's ideas, because Prudhomme wrote a book called the Critique or something like that, the Critique of Philosophy, but. Marx and Engels are going to write something called the Critique of Philosophy and something like that,
No,
which
it's
goes. What was it?
the critique of the critical critic.
Yeah, the Critique of the Critical Critic, because I think Prudhomme wrote a book called The Critical Critic or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Which is kind of interesting because while we were watching this movie, or after we were watching this movie, I was like, Marx is like that type of guy. If he was now, he would blow up his YouTube channel just doing reaction videos to people, saying, "Oh, these people are stupid. They don't know what they're talking about." Like that was his whole. That's the way he came up by kind of like being a hater, kind of like doing a lot of dissertations and disses on people. I don't know. What did you think about that?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, maybe he didn't have that much momentum himself,
Hmm.
and everyone sort of like saw him as this, like, irritating guy who just like bashes everyone's ideas.
Hmm.
So yeah, like he gained momentum through that, I guess.
Yeah. But no, I'm being a bit facetious and I'm joking a bit when saying that he was like a hater because really what he was doing was he was trying to usher in a new way of thinking, right? He's the young blood on the block who's trying to, say that philosophy shouldn't just be about talking and writing. We should actually try to implement real change, right? And Prudhomme is there when Marx puts out this idea and he actually approves of it. So it goes to show that Marx is not actually trying to hate on Prudhomme. They all have drinks. They cheers to Marx's book and everything, and they, decide that this is good for thinking, for growing minds and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, philosophy needs debate,
Hmm.
like you cannot just agree with everyone that comes up with an idea, and that's how it grows. And that's how new ideas like happen. And there are like in the movie, there are some ones like
Hmm.
Prolong, I don't know his name.
Prudhomme.
Proudhon, he like is able to like take criticism and debate with Marx, but like what Whiteling, the other
Hmm.
guy, he's
Hmm.
like very always offended by Marx when he
Yeah.
critiques his ideas. So it's like these two types of, figures.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And Waitling's thing is like, he's a part of this branch of socialism where the idea is that, we should all just love each other, even love the bosses who oppress us, so that we can move forward as society. We should try to get rid of the wage oppression where people are paid, $1 a day to work for 10 hours in a dark factory. But we should still love our bosses. But Marx's ideas are a bit more radical, where he says, no, the bosses are the permanent enemy of the working class. If you work for a boss, they will always not have your best interest at heart. And that goes to this big speech that happens sort of like in the middle of the movie where Marx is talking in front of all these workers in, I believe, in Germany or in France. Because I think now the movie moves where Marx is now living in Paris. And he basically puts out all of his ideas. I don't know, acting. Am I right or
He's
wrong here?
he's not living in Paris. Basically, he's living in Cologne, but then he gets exiled because he writes a piece about like some government thing, I think.
Okay.
And then he has to like they take away his and his wife's passports, so they move to Brussels. And then when he was in Brussels, Engels calls him to England, to I don't know where in England, but somewhere in London, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like to come and help him with all the politics going on in London.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's where like there's a society there, brotherhood society or something.
Yeah, the Society of the Just or something like that.
Yeah.
Okay, but there's a meeting that Marx is speaking at that happens in Faubourg Saint Antoine, and it's called the Craft Workers Meeting. And this part of the film is very essential for anybody who wants to understand what Marx's ideas was, because he says it very clearly in front of the audience, and then people can make their own decision about whether he's right or wrong. But he's basically saying that the whole thing about Marxism is that in a capitalist society, the people who create value are not the bosses, it's the workers. So every time you go to work and you do an activity or you make something, the value is not in the iPhone in and of itself, it's the value that people put into it. So, when the people in the Congo are going into the earth to extract diamonds with their bare hands, right? The diamond in and of itself is not valuable. It's the work that goes into extracting the diamond. When that diamond is then transferred to China and then pounded into a million pieces to create the silicon that, makes the microchips, the silicon in and of itself that's created is not the value. It's the labor that the Chinese workers put into it. When the iPhone is then packaged and sold in the iPhone store, the value is not in the box or the phone. It's the value of the total labor that goes into making the phone, right? And then people will say, well, there will always be workers and bosses. And some people in the crowd yell this at Marx, but Marx says that's not true. Like all forms of human society, slavery, serfdom, wage labor, all of these things eventually change over time, and none of them are permanent. And that's what the bourgeoisie, the capitalists, want you to think. They want you to learn history and think that we always had bosses and workers, but it wasn't the case, right? And all things are eventually in change. The bourgeois is free, but the workers are always slaves, because work is different than any other social relation, because you need work to survive. None of us can just say I don't want to work anymore, because saying I don't want to work anymore in a capitalist society says I willingly want to die. So these are Marx's biggest ideas, and yeah, this is sort of like the purpose of his whole movement, his whole ideas. So after hearing that, actually, what did you think about that scene? Because I felt like that scene was very important.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's so I felt like, okay, like it's so twisted how the world and the society right now that we live in, which is a capitalist society, makes us see the world, because we're always sort of appreciating the bourgeoisie, right? Oh,
Mm-hmm.
thank God, like someone found Apple, or
Mm-hmm.
thank God, like there is this washing machine or something.
Mm-hmm.
But we're not like um, inclined to appreciate the workers who actually create these materials,
Mm-hmm.
and rather we appreciate like the factory owner, or the person who came up with the product
Mm-hmm.
as an idea and things like that, because none of those things would be possible without the workers force.
Right. It's
And
crazy to say Steve Jobs made the iPhone.
yeah, exactly. So, and that's how like the society sort of like codes us into thinking, and it's really hard to separate yourself from that thought, uh, because we're born into that world.
Mm-hmm.
So, and like it's every day, like it gets worse and worse. And yeah, I really like his ideas, but I don't know if there's a future for communism.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, I thought the speech was very moving and very simple. And what I like about this film is that it sort of makes Marx's big ideas very streamlined and simple. And any sort of rebuke or disagreement you could have with his ideas are sort of settled in this film or discussed in this film. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah,
So
but
yeah,
yeah,
go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, in today's world, everybody aspires to be bourgeoisie, right?
Hmm.
Like
Hmm.
everybody wants to be an owner of something, or yeah, like have workers and all of those things, but no one aspires to be a worker, because it's still like very unfair to be a worker of
Hmm.
any kind. Like either you work in a factory or you work in a, I don't know, tech company,
Hmm.
you're still not getting a fair pay, because I think you said this before. like your boss is definitely earning much more than whatever you are earning,
Right,
no
right.
matter like what your wage is.
Well, we
But
were discussing this during the film. You said you were thinking like, what if the factory workers got a fair wage, right? So like what did you mean by that?
like everyone gets paid equally.
Okay. Okay, but what's equal, right? Like literally the boss makes $100 and the worker makes $100 too?
Yeah, like because without the workers there's no boss,
Mhm.
if that
Okay, but
makes
then
sense.
people would
Like
say without the boss there's no workers.
I mean there could be like, if there's no boss but all the workers like are dedicated to their work, there could be, but the bosses like aim is to sort of organize the work, right?
Mhm.
And the workers are the ones who's doing the work, so it's like it's equal work in my head, so
Okay.
it should be equal pay.
Well,
Just
somebody
because your job description is different and doesn't include a physical work doesn't mean you're doing something more important.
Well, somebody would say, the person who starts a business inherits a lot of risk. And if you take a lot of risk, you should get a lot of reward. So if I open my company, why should I share the profits when none of these people were there with me at the beginning when I opened my food truck, for example?
Yeah, but you wouldn't be where you are without any of those people.
Right. And this is the perpetual debate that the socialists and capitalists have, or the communists and the capitalists have, till the end of time, right?
Yeah.
But, I've already made it clear where I stand on this issue. The value does lie in workers. We do need a more equitable society because the way capitalism is set up in and of itself is unsustainable. Whether you think that paying people $1 million an hour or $10 an hour is right, this thing will never last in the way that it is structured, right? Because wealth continues to be stratified more to the top, right? They say like right now in our world, 1% of people own 30% of the world's wealth. That doesn't sit right with me. When we have children starving, when we have people working 17 hours a day, barely able to pay rent, that's not right under any circumstance.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. But after Marx gives that big speech, Engels comes up to him and says, you're in trouble with the government of Prussia or Germany, whatever you want to call it. But if you need any help, come to me. I'll be there to help you get out of the country. And then after Marx and Engels have this conversation, Whiteling comes on stage. And his speech is accepted a lot more by people. But Whiteling is more of like a messiah type figure. He's giving this big, rousing speech saying the workers are invincible. We will rise up. We will sort of take over. But there's no meaning in what he's saying. It's just more, religious than it is philosophical or meaningful. And Marx is looking at Whiteling and like, this is something that we really need to address, right? So then the next scene is Marx and Jenny are at home and they're preparing their bags and packing up everything because they hear the police outside, and then the police break in when Marx and Jenny are trying to escape, and they tell them that they're going to get kicked out of the country, right? Then the next scene is I think they're in Brussels after that. But before we get to that, what do you think? What did you think about all of that when Marx and Jenny were kicked out, Whiteling, everything?
Yeah, with Whiteling, for me, he felt like the first hippie or something, because he was like, yeah, like all peace to you, brothers. And I'm like, okay. But yeah, and about like Marx and Jenny being kicked out of the country, yeah, it's such a hard life. That's what I was
Hmm.
thinking, because like you have to constantly move, you're not accepted like anywhere, and it's like you write a piece and you're like banned from the whole country.
Yeah.
And I think there was like a scene after he got exiled, he was trying to send like a letter to
Hmm.
Engels, because he needed help or money or something.
Hmm.
But they wouldn't, like they told him they couldn't read his handwriting, as
No,
a symbol of like, we're
no,
not gonna accept your letter because
no.
you're
In that
like,
situation, Marx was trying to apply for a job at a post office, but they found some excuse not to hire him.
oh, he was applying for a job. Okay,
Yeah, yeah,
I thought he was trying to send a letter, but
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
they're basically like rejecting him because he's politically stamped.
Yeah.
So I was thinking, like, yeah, it's a hard life because your job is to be this philosopher, this critique, this journalist type of person. But
Hmm.
once you're exiled, everything kind of ends for you there, and you have to start a new life.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I like the scene where they show, Jenny and Marx and their baby. By the way, they have a baby too, and yeah, they're preparing to like try to escape, and it goes to show like the struggle is real. And Marx went through like some real struggle, and also all the people after Marx who have died in the name of his ideas or fought on behalf of his ideas went through struggle as well. And it just reminded me that the fight against this sort of oppressive system or this oppressive world where people are just trying to think of new ways or act on new ways to organize society, they'll always be oppressed. But I like that Jenny was a writer. I like the whole way the scene was shot, how the room was very dark and cramped, and you didn't know if they were going to get beaten up or killed or something. It was very, very powerful. I like that. Moving on in the film, basically, Ingalls, we go back to England, and Ingalls goes to work at his factory. His dad is the boss. He sits down at his desk, and his dad is pissed. He walks in and he throws a newspaper down on the desk and says, "My son is associated with this man named Marx, who wrote a piece critical of the church." And back then, in this time, uh, talking shit about religion was not okay under any circumstance. They took their Jesus very seriously back then. And his father is also like disappointed that his son is like hanging out with these socialists and being around all these people. And his father is like, I'm doing you a favor by giving this job. And Ingalls is like, I never wanted any favors. I don't want to be a part of this anymore. And he basically slams the door on his father and says, "I'm suffocating being here." What did you think about that confrontation right there?
I thought this scene was also very powerful because right before he goes into the office to work for his father, he's passing through the factory and he's
Hmm.
like looking at the faces of like children basically working in the factory, like maybe I don't know, 15 years old girl or something like that.
Hmm.
And then like the way he's looking at his father is like you can see how he feels somewhat guilty, but also like he feels an obligation to do something about it, which
Hmm.
is like powerful, and that's where like his power comes from.
Hmm.
And yeah, I was thinking like first of all, I really like that when his father got angry he switched to German, and like you know, and it was like kind of funny for me.
Yeah.
And also like I was thinking, man, like this dynamic never changes, like all these like sort of oppressive rich fathers are always the same even today and things like
Mm.
that.
Yeah.
And yeah, like he got balls, like because he was probably threatened by like his father, like taking his funds away and things like that, but
Hmm.
he stood up for it, which was
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, I definitely, this film will make you probably respect Engels more than Marx because a lot of the times when we think about communism, we just think of Marx. But without Engels, Marx literally probably would have died in poverty unknown because Engels took a lot of chances and risks to be next to his homie. And yeah, to stand up to his father like that, who knows if that actually happened? Like, once again, that might be dramatized too, just like the running from the police scene, but it still goes to show that Ingalls was willing to, buck the system and go against the grain to stand up for his ideas. So I like that. And also, like you said, the scene when he's walking through the factory, the film once again brings it all full circle and makes it still very real that, at this time, literal children were working in factories. And by the way, that's not something that's gone out of style. In the US, right, they're trying to always lower the working age. I believe in Florida, a kid at 14 can work a full 40 hours a week as long as they have parents' permission. In other states as well, they found slaughtering houses, like basically places where they killed chicken and pigs and stuff like that, full of children who were illegal migrants. Back in a few years ago, when Trump was separating kids at the border from their parents, a lot of those kids went missing and then ended up working in places like Iowa or Indiana, where they were like working like grown ass men for no pay and stuff like that. So yeah, child labor is not gone. There are many places in the world, not just in America, where child labor is still real. So yeah, once again, this film is not something that's just only talking about the past. It's still very relevant to today.
Yeah, that's crazy, and that's like very sad that this was like these were the conditions in 1840s
Hmm.
and before that probably as well, but they're still true like for hundreds of years. This has been like the reality, and still today it is the reality.
Yeah, yeah. Um, but moving on in the story, basically, after Ingalls has that fight with his father, he goes to Mary. Mary is like there to comfort him, and once again, we see that our heroes get pussy. Ingalls and Marx both got gooch, and after they hook up, after meeting again, uh, Mary tells Ingalls that he got Ingalls a opportunity to interview with this big socialist league called the League of the Just, which is basically like a workers' union that's spread all across Europe. And they're very radical in trying to change the way that workers are organized and to get better rights for workers in the industrialized world. But they don't have a set sort of platform, right? They don't have a set sort of ideas. They're sort of like going the whiteling approach, which is, all men are brothers. Let's all just unify. Let's try to convince the boss to just change his ways. And they want to bring in Engels and March to interview because they need new blood to sort of change the doctrine, right? And so Marx is like living in poverty, I believe, in like Brussels. Also, his wife gives birth to like a new baby, and there's a scene where Jenny is upstairs giving birth and she's screaming and howling, and Marx has to sit there on the bottom floor just hearing his wife go through all that pain. And I felt that scene because Marx probably had said, damn, I have no money, I'm living in a foreign country, I have another baby on the way, and there was just so much happening in his life. So what did you think about those scenes?
Yeah, like I don't know what is up with like these influential, successful men and obsession with having a bunch of babies. But yeah, it was definitely he had a hard life because he had a big family, I would assume,
Mhm.
and I would assume like he had more kids after that. And yeah, that's you can feel like in the movie his desperation, really like trying to struggle with the system but also
Mhm.
being like opposite to the system. And yeah, it's really hard to it I think it shows like how hard it is to really take a stand,
Mhm.
because the society is like basically doing anything to keep us from rioting and having other opinions and things like that.
Yeah, like I said, I really felt that scene, and like you said, Acti, he really was taking a stand, but also taking all the hits for it as well. No money, living in poverty. Later on, he has to write a letter to Ingalls saying, like, I'm down on my luck, and Ingalls sends him some money. So one day, Marx comes home after getting the money from Ingalls, and he finds that the landlord is there asking for it. He pulls out his pocket and gives them, 3 or 4 shillings or whatever, and he pays them, right? And then he also pulls out a lobster and says, "We're gonna have lobster dinner." And when we were watching the movie, you said, "Mark, so how are you gonna just get some money and spend it on lobster?" That's not very socialist of you. I don't know. Do you remember that?
Yeah, yeah. I was like, okay, there goes all the money.
There goes
Like
all the
just
money.
on a lobster dinner. Okay.
On a lobster dinner. But basically, Marx, after getting the money from Ingalls, he sits down with Jenny and says, I'm going to go to London or Manchester, whatever. I'm going to the UK to, speak to the League of the Just, right? And Jenny's like, do you want me to stay here? And then Marx is like, no, we're going to go together, I believe. Is that right?
No, he goes alone first.
Oh, he goes alone first. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. But now is a good time to mention that Marx had a superpower. This man learned like 4 or 5 languages in between like 2 scenes. Like, of course, he spoke German because he was from Germany, but the man learned French and English like in a matter of days after moving to the country. And he's able to have like philosophical debates with people in a foreign language, which puts me to shame. Like, after all the places I've been, I still can't speak shit. But what did you think of that?
Yeah, it was kind of like hilarious because yeah, like Engels basically tells Carl at some point in the movie like he should read some English writers,
Hmm.
and like we see him in the library reading in English and then like noting every word and looking up in the dictionary, and then
Hmm.
like basically probably that's how he learned the languages. But it's also so hard to like learn the language up to a level where you could have a philosophical discussion.
Yeah.
So I applaud Marx for that in like real life.
Yeah, that's it's such a amazing power. Like literally, if I could snap my fingers and have any superpower to fly, to shoot fire beams out of my hands, I would only ask to speak every language in the world fluently. And I have a lot of high regard for people that can learn it so quick. But damn, it's like in between drinking his ass off, playing chess all day, writing, and having sex with Jenny and having 20 kids. How do you learn French? How do you just learn German? Like, how do you just learn English so quick? It's wild. It was very wild.
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. But picking up in the story, basically, Ingalls and Marx sit down with the League of the Just in Manchester, and they're actually kind of tough on them. They're very, suspicious of these guys. They're not sure about their writings or their beliefs. But Whiteling comes and sort of advocates for them, and Whiteling says, see the marks on my shin that I took from the police. And Marx is like, spare me the dramatics of your preaching and stuff like that. So the League of the Just says, we want you guys to sit down and try to write a new, idea for what the League of the Just will stand for. And Marx and Engels then meet up with uh, Whiteling and a bunch of other guys in a room and have a big discussion about that. But before that happens, there's a scene where Ingalls tries to go to a salon in some fancy place, and he brings his raggedy Irish broad, Mary, with him. But they're saying, like, no women are allowed and stuff like that. And so Ingalls is like, first upset, but then he decides to leave. But as he's leaving, he meets another rich capitalist who knows his dad, and Marx is there with him. And Marx then confronts the guy and says, how many children do you have working in your factory? How many of your workers have died? And all that sort of stuff. And the boss is like, well, that's just the cost of doing business. And I really like that confrontational scene. What did you think about that one?
Yeah, definitely. It was like really powerful because those are the still like same excuses that powerful people say today. Like that's just how the system is, I can't help it. Like you
Mm-hmm.
want me to go out of business and
Yeah.
all those sorts of excuses. It's like you're not going to go out of business, but it takes not only the working class but also like the higher class to make a change, in my
Mm-hmm.
opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I said like earlier, it's I kind of cannot see communism working because of those people.
Mm.
But yeah, like it was very real, and it was like um it was like, oh, it's so easy like for this guy to give those excuses because he doesn't have to worry about anything else.
Yeah. I think Marx even said to him, your biggest fear, Mr. Capitalist, is that one day you would have to work too. And I thought that was a powerful line. I don't know if you caught that.
Yeah, that was definitely a burn.
That was definitely a burn. But as far as like the idea that maybe communism won't work because of people like the capitalist who says I create jobs for people. Somebody would then say, well, the only reason that the capitalism has been upheld is because people believe in it and still hold up the ideas of the bourgeoisie. They'll people that say we don't need capitalism, they're also the type of people to say one day I can be a capitalist too, one day I can be rich too, I can be the boss man too, when it's very unlikely. Most of us will not be millionaires, most of us will not make it to the other side. We're going to always be somebody's wage slave to some degree. And I think that's what Marx was saying earlier in the film too, like that's what we always have to fight against. We have to fight against the idea that this sort of system is permanent. But yeah, the whole
Yeah.
confrontation between the capitalist and Marx right there was very powerful because that's Marx going face to face with the people who sort of create this society, right?
Yeah, definitely. And once again, like applauding Engels here because he didn't sell out. He wasn't trying to be like polite or anything like that. And he was like supporting, his wife and Marx.
Yeah. Once again, ain't no coon in Engel's body.
Yeah.
The opposite of coon. Anyway, there's a scene that comes up next where Marx and Whiteling's followers and Engels are all in a big smoky room and they're having a debate. And then Marx finally brings it to Whiteling and he says, "Yo, all that preaching, all that Messiah talk, all that all men are brothers, all that shit gotta die." And Whiteling's like, "Who the fuck are you?" And Marx is like, we're gonna start doing some real concrete action. We standing on business on this side. And Whiteling's like, you people critique until you end up critiquing yourselves, and then you end up eating yourselves. And then Whiteling leaves the room. And Engels is like, oh shit, we're done. We're done. We just insulted the guy who's basically like the messiah for this League of the Just organization. And Marx is like, so I don't care. What did you think of that scene?
Yeah, I really liked, how they depicted Marx here because he didn't take no shit. It was
Mm-hmm.
like, this is what I think, and I think you're full of bullshit. And yeah, like you gotta do something, not only preach for the people and all of those things. And I think he also like insulted Hegel or like his ideas or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And yeah, like, but at the same time, he was friends with the other guy, what is
Proudhon.
Proudhon.
Yeah.
And yeah, like he's friends with him, but he's also debating his ideas too.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that's when they say to the League of the
Mm-hmm.
Just, like, okay, we're gonna get Proudhon into like giving a speech or something.
Mm-hmm.
But they go out to meet him, and he's like, I'm too lazy to do that. Like, I'm
Mm-hmm.
not doing that, and I do appreciate like whatever you're doing, but I cannot like take that much work because I have too many stuff on my hands already.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
like, yeah, it just showed that he's not afraid to go for it.
Yeah, yeah. I think the reason Marx went at Whiteling so hard was because number one, he was really standing up for his ideas, but then two, I think the League of the Just told Marx like, you guys have connections to Proudhon. We would like to have Proudhon be a representative for our organization, so you guys can do that for us, right? So Marx was like, I don't even need Whiteling here because we're about to clear this bitch out. We're about to air out everybody, and we're gonna get some of our big dogs in here. But then when he does go to meet Proudhon, Proudhon does say, I'm too lazy for this shit. You guys take care of it. And then Proudhon hands Marx his new book, The Poverty of Philosophy. And Marx reads it, Engels reads it, and then they decide to do what they do best. They decide to critique it. And they write a book titled The Poverty of Philosophy, and basically it becomes like a hit, and one of the final scenes is Marx giving a speech in front of the League of the Just, saying like, what we're going to do now is we're no Marx doesn't give the speech, Engels gives the speech, right?
Yeah, sorry, Engels give the speech.
Yeah, yeah. And what happens in the speech?
Basically, like, Engels is repeating like what they have been saying. It's like, we need to take action, and he's saying like, no, like, we're not all brothers, and the bosses are enemies, and like the same stuff. And then he changes the party, and he says like, from now on, this is not like the Brotherhood, this is not the League of the Just, this is like the Workers' Party, this is Communist Party or Communist League or something like that. And yeah, that's basically like communism born.
Well,
The-
it was more interesting than that because like Engels was speaking in front of the crowd, and people were like, "Engels is just speaking for Marx." And Marx stands up and says, "Nah, I ain't hiding. I'm right here. I'm just letting my dog handle business." That was hard. I love that. I love that. I love that. And there was like a section of the crowd that was more Proudhon. So anytime somebody said like, "Who supports Proudhon's ideas?" there was like this one section of the audience that raised their hands, and then who supports Whiteling? There was like another section. But then Engels gave his speech so well that the permanent enemy of the working class is the boss, and that we need to always remember that the boss is the enemy of all of us, that we can never be brothers with them. And so then Mary and Jenny, I believe, run up on stage. Then they snatch down the sign that says League of the Just, and then they throw up the red flag for the communist flag there, and the whole crowd goes crazy, which is which is wild. I don't know. I like that scene a lot. What did you think of it?
Yeah, it was really interesting and very fiery. And I like the fact that for every action they were voting. Like
Hmm.
there was no like taking over really. They took over, but they took over with the consent of everyone, which
Hmm.
I liked because it wasn't like a coup where they threw over the party and things like that.
Yeah.
And they were like, okay, here's our new idea. And like say A if you agree with it.
Hmm.
And yeah, people digged it. So that
Yeah.
was pretty nice.
Yeah, yeah, very, very interesting way. And once again, if you don't know anything about Marx or only just know a little bit, I didn't know that basically the first Communist Party, or at least the one that we know that published the Communist Manifesto, is basically Marx took it over, right? It was like a coup from the inside, right? And we sort of skipped over that part, but there's the section where they're writing the Communist Manifesto, and it was very dope as well. And for people who haven't read that book, you need to read it. It's only about 70 pages long. I read it when I was 15, 16. Very dope book and still very understandable and still very relevant to today. But the way they composed it, it was basically sort of like a committee. There's Jenny there, Mary is there, Ingalls is there, and Marx is there. So it makes it seem like it was very collaborative how they put that book together. But yeah, any comments about that?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't read the manifesto, and I also didn't know that much about Marx, but like it's still understandable, and you definitely learn a lot about his ideas. Because I just knew like overall of what he stood for, but it
Mm,
definitely gave me like a closer look and depth into like communism and his ideas,
yeah.
and they're actually like solid points,
Hmm.
for a fair society.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I definitely like the fact that I learned something from all over the movie.
Yeah, yeah. So just going to the last scene, finishing all this up. By the way, there's some really big horses in this film. I don't know why these ponies look like, uh, there's some big ass horses in this film.
Okay.
That was random. Anyway, last scene of the film is essentially Marx, Ingalls, and Marx's wife Jenny, and Ingalls' girlfriend Mary, like walking on the beach, and they're talking about their lives and futures. The first conversation is Jenny and Mary talking about children, right? And Jenny has like 20 kids by now because Marx just kept on pumping her up. And Jenny is saying like, Mary, do you plan to have kids? And Mary's like, no, I'm dedicated to the struggle. And maybe if Ingalls wants kids, he can have my sister, so they could have kids via surrogate or something. But Mary is sort of like, I just don't want kids. I want to be free, right? And I want to continue to fight. And Jenny is like, oh, I understand. What did you think of their conversation?
I really liked the conversation, and once again, I really like Mary because he's giving like a different perspective of being a woman, especially during that time. Like
Hmm.
that's, I would say that's pretty very radical.
Hmm.
And yeah, like the fact that she's like, okay, like I just don't want to be tied down by motherly duties, and I
Hmm.
have more to give to this revolution or to this like idea and stuff like that, which was
Hmm.
pretty cool. And I like the fact that like Jenny didn't judge her.
Mm.
And I mean, the idea of like your sister be getting pregnant by your husband
Hmm.
is sort of twisted, and I
Well, it's really
wouldn't.
it's really not because surrogacy has existed for thousands of years. I mean,
Yeah, but I mean, your sister, I don't know. Like, I wouldn't do that, but I wouldn't also like say like I wouldn't judge her if she wanted to do it like that, but obviously like that time is, different.
hmm,
And you cannot pay for like a surrogacy probably because she is a working class, woman.
right, right.
So I get that, and that's fine. But yeah, and I just like the fact that Jenny didn't like judge her either because she understood the burden of having kids and be having to be a mother and
Hmm.
yeah, all of those things.
Yeah, I would say, that last scene really shows the difference between Mary and Jenny because we didn't talk about this in the review, but Jenny has the same background as Ingalls. She comes from an aristocratic background, very wealthy, but she gave it all up to be with Marx, a man that she loves, who also was a Jew, even though his father converted. He was a Jew at that time, which was still a big mark against him. And on top of that, he was an atheist and a socialist communist. So she sort of gave up all of her ties to the bourgeoisie, but she still sort of kept some of the remnants of bourgeoisie culture. Because when Mary and Jenny are sitting side by side, Jenny is dressed like a pilgrim. Like she's dressed like in the 18th century version of the niqab, right? Like she's covered up, she's got the cape and the three-layered gown and all that sort of stuff. Meanwhile, Mary is wearing more simple clothes, showing that she comes from the more of the working class background. But now their situations have changed because Mary is married to the rich man and Jenny is married to the poor man. So it's sort of like a weird reverse. And I like how in that last scene you see the two different attitudes in life, but also who these characters are or who these people were because of their, background. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's really powerful because even though they might be different in so many ways in like background or what they want in the future and how their lives are right now, it's like it's still possible to stand up for the same things,
Hmm.
even though you might have very different lives. And also like something that Mary said here, like she said like I have to be poor to be able to, you know, fight
Hmm.
for the struggle because I don't see it any other way like happening for me.
Hmm.
And it was like really nice that she said, and she was like proud and okay with being poor.
Hmm.
And yeah, that was like also some one of the ideas that Marx was like trying to say, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, it's very interesting. Mary was once again one of the highlights of this movie, just her acting. Shout out to the actress who played her. I'm gonna find her name real quick. Person who played Mary's name, Hannah Steele, and I believe she actually is Irish. So she really held it down in this film as well. But going to the last conversation between Ingalls and Marx, basically Marx is like, man, I'm tired, bro. I'm tired of writing pamphlets. I'm tired of writing posters. I want to write books. And Ingalls is like, man, we got to keep on going. We got to keep on pressing. Like, there's revolutions happening right now, like in Paris and other parts of Europe. We need to continue to press the line. We're this close to victory. And Marx is like, man, I got a family to feed. I got articles I need to write to make money to feed my kids. And Ingalls is like, how dare you? Like, how dare you just be so, lazy right now? All right. But eventually they sort of seem to come to some conclusions and stuff like that. But yeah, what did you think of that last conversation?
Yeah, like once again, I said this in the beginning, but it kind of shows how the system that we live in kind of can wear you down.
Hmm.
Like he still wanted to defend his ideas and like he wanted to go all the way and stuff like that. But it's like he also has to compromise to stay alive and feed his kids and things like that. So it kind of shows like even a fiery young man like Marx with incredible ideas, even him like is tired at some point.
Hmm.
But I believe like he did still continue to fight. But we all have those moments where like fuck it,
Yeah.
I'm just gonna do it and survive, and I won't care about the social consequences or anything like that.
Hmm.
And yeah, I felt that because yeah, like I would say a lot of people who think like us do struggle with helping people, standing up for the right causes and things like that, but then they also get tired.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like Marx was tired just from the work, but even though they did so many great things, like they were able to take over the society of the just, they were able to, get communism moving and their ideas out there. They defeated their enemies like Whiteling. They overcame the fame of Proudhon to become more famous than him and more renowned than him. But Marx was like, what's next? And the film is sort of like centered around all of these people who are supporting this genius, but the genius is sort of reluctant a little bit of his own success, right? Like if there isn't a fight, Marx doesn't have the motivation. because he was motivated to debate Proudhon. He was motivated to write critiques of the critique. But now that it's him on his own, at the pinnacle now, what is he going to do? And that goes to show like these people, Engels, Jenny, Mary, they all sort of were coalescing around Marx to push him to greatness, from what I see. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, yeah, at the end of the movie, they're writing the Communist Manifesto. And as the words of the manifesto are playing, they show the faces of people who are working in the factories, poor people, children, young women, and that sort of stuff, who are, working and slaving in these factories all across Europe and stuff like that. The end of the end of the movie shows that the manifesto has been published even still to this day. Marx lived the rest of his life in England, and he continued to write. Eventually, his book called Capital, which is a very long book. It's Marx's magnum opus, and it wasn't even finished during Marx's lifetime because he was writing about an ever evolving system called capitalism. As the movie plays the credits, we see images of what happened after, which is the socialist revolutions in Russia, in Cuba, in North Korea. We see the nuclear bomb dropping. We see the 20th century play out in the reels. We see racial segregation in South Africa, civil rights protests in America, blah 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 blah. Which sort of goes to show like how big of an effect Marx was, right? Because this one man sort of set the rest of these chain of events in for the next century and a half to happen. So yeah, what did you think of the ending?
Yeah, it was definitely powerful. I like that they quoted like the manifesto, and yeah, like the ending with all those images, it definitely shows like the huge effect and people who were inspired by Marx. And yeah, like it was a very powerful ending, I would say.
Yeah, perfect ending. I wouldn't want it to end any other way. Overall, what score would you give this film?
I would give it a 6.5.
Okay, why?
I mean, like you said, it's can be like somewhat I don't know, sleepy at some points because there is a lot of like political talking and things like that, and this can be hard to follow because of the translation sometimes.
Mm,
But I do think it was like a somewhat a hard thing to portray this in a movie with everything that was going on with Marx and his ideas, and yeah, how he conducted them. So I do applaud like the director for being able to do it like somewhat interesting way.
mhm,
And obviously like the ideas are inspiring for me, so that's one reason that I liked as well. But yeah, like I don't know. It wasn't like the most entertaining or the best movie I saw, so
mhm.
but it was still very educating for me.
Yeah. Once again, I agree with you because I think I said that at the beginning too. Like, this film is not for everybody, and it's probably not a film you would want to watch again, but it is very educational. It does sort of make these big ideas very simple. A lot of people already have preconceived notions about communism or socialism, but, I think it's important to educate yourself, whether you agree with these ideas before the movie or after the movie. It's important to understand ideas. And I would recommend everybody watch this movie at least once, but watch it, watch it early in the afternoon or early in the morning when you have some rest, because it might put you to sleep because it's not the most action-packed, all enthralling film. But it's definitely, I would say, worthwhile. A great movie by a black director, showing this time in history. It's very unique. Most of the time they get white people to make films like this, but I'm glad that a black man took the time and the opportunity to craft this world, because this world on screen looks just as real as, like, I don't know, Bridgerton or Game of Thrones, or I don't know, a film about Marie Curie. Like, you would think only white people can make European, 18th century European society look that real, but I'm glad that a black man could do it. So that's all I got to say.
Yeah, and also like I think this movie does a good job of mirroring today's society. Like
Hmm.
as you're watching it, you can see some struggles, most of the struggles, still like existing today. So
Yeah.
That's a good way to spark up your revolutionarist feelings.
All right, right, right. My score will be like a. I'm gonna give it an 8. I gotta give it an 8. You know. Yeah, I give it an 8.
Okay.
All right, all right. Well, this has been Simon and Acting Movie Reviews, episode 44. Shout out to Avery Adams. Shout out to Matt Villainy. Shout out to Nelson Moreno jumping into the live stream and listening. Y'all send more movie requests, more ones that you want us to review, and peace.